Elias Vance came to Blackglass Pass to sell the last piece of land that still carried his name. Before noon, he heard a chain striking an avalanche beacon that had been dead for 6 winters. A German shepherd was tied there in the new snow, wearing a rescue harness with the insignia cut away. She would not follow him to the truck, but she kept turning toward a sealed station beneath the mountain. What waited below was not treasure, and it was not a forgotten bunker. It was proof that people had been paid for rescues that never happened while real dogs disappeared from the records. Stay with us and tell us where you are listening from today. If stories of loyalty and second chances matter to you, help us reach 5,000 subscribers by joining the channel. The chain struck the metal beacon 3 times before Elias Vance realized the sound was not coming from the wind. He had been standing on the porch of the Blackglass weather station with a ring of keys in one hand and a county sales packet in the other. The first snow of the season moved sideways across the pass, thin and dry, collecting in the seams of his waxed canvas coat. Above him, the old station windows reflected a sky, the color of worn steel. Below, the access road bent around the mountain and disappeared into a stand of fir. The place was supposed to be empty. After 24 years in Navy SEAL teams, Elias had learned to notice the difference between an abandoned position and one someone had only made to look abandoned. It had been empty for 6 years. Elias listened again. Clink, apphouse, clink, clink. He folded the packet, slipped it beneath his arm, and stepped away from the porch. His left knee resisted the first 2 steps down, a familiar stiffness sharpened by altitude and cold. He ignored it. The sound came from the western side of the station, beyond the buried fuel tank and the row of avalanche markers that ran toward the tree line. "Hello," he called. The wind carried his voice away. Elias moved past marker 7, then 8. At marker 9, he stopped. A German shepherd stood half-hidden behind the beacon post. A steel cable ran from her harness to the base of the marker. Snow had gathered along her spine and around her paws. She was not barking. She was not pulling against the line. She simply watched him with dark amber eyes and held one front foot a fraction above the ground. Elias lowered the sales packet to the snow. "Well," he said quietly, "you are not supposed to be here." The dog's ears moved toward his voice, but her body remained still. She was a sable female, lean beneath a thick winter coat, with black across her muzzle and a faint silver cast along her shoulders. A small notch marked the edge of her left ear. The harness was professional rescue equipment, faded blue, with the rectangular patch on each side, cut away so close that threads still showed. Someone had not merely removed an insignia, someone had taken care to erase it. Elias crouched several yards from her. His breath shortened before he noticed it. The beacon post, the cable, the open white slope behind the dog, something about the arrangement drew an old image from him. A training route above Ketchum, a weather report revised too late, a man named Aaron Vale tightening the strap beneath his chin and saying, "We still have 40 minutes. Elias closed his right hand around the brass compass hanging beneath his coat. 1 breath. 2, 3. The pass returned around him. He took off one glove and held out his empty hand. "I'm not going to pull you," he said. "You can decide whether I get closer." The German shepherd lowered her nose. She tested the air, then touched the nearest section of cable 3 times with the front of her muzzle. Tap, tap. Tap. Elias waited. After several seconds, the dog shifted her weight and allowed him to approach. The raised paw came down carefully. No visible blood. No broken angle. Cold injury, perhaps, or the ache of standing too long against the cable. The lock at the base of the post was not a padlock. It was a crimped climbing sleeve tightened with a hydraulic press. Whoever had secured her knew how to make a line difficult to remove without tools. "Someone meant for you to stay," Elias said. Her gaze moved past him to the weather station. The main building had once monitored snowpack, wind direction, and slope stability for the county. Elias had inherited the upper 40 acres from his uncle, along with the derelict structure, after a chain of budget cuts moved the station to an automated ridge farther south. He had spent the previous month deciding whether to sell. The county wanted the access corridor. A private ski developer wanted the view. Elias wanted nothing except to finish the paperwork and drive back to a rented room outside Grand Junction, where no one asked why he slept with the lights on. The dog touched the cable again. Tap, tap. Tap. All right. He went to the maintenance shed, and returned with bolt cutters, a blanket, and a small tool bag. The crimp fought him. He braced one boot against the marker and leaned his weight into the handles. The cable snapped with a flat metallic crack. The dog flinched but did not run. Elias slipped the cut section through the harness ring. When the cable fell away, she took 2 steps toward the station rather than toward the access road. Truck is the other direction. She looked back once, then continued to the western wall. Elias followed. Snow hissed across the foundation. The dog stopped at a steel service door beneath a narrow overhang. A red county seal covered the latch. Elias had checked that door during his first inspection. Behind it was supposed to be a utility stair descending to the battery room and an obsolete signal relay. The county electrician had marked the entire lower level inactive. The German shepherd pressed her nose against the seam. 3 taps. Then she sat. Elias studied the seal. It was intact, but the screws on the latch plate carried fresh scratches. He knelt and ran a thumb over them. Bright steel showed beneath the old paint. Someone opened this. The dog's ears lifted. From somewhere below the floor came a faint click. Elias froze. The click, repeated at regular intervals, too precise for ice settling and too soft for a loose pipe. Click. 4 seconds. Click. He looked toward the ridge. The station had no power. He had disconnected the temporary generator himself that morning. The sound continued. Elias removed the county seal without breaking it, sliding the wire loop free from a poorly closed crimp. The latch opened. Cold air pushed outward, carrying the smell of concrete dust and something electrical. The dog stood but did not cross the threshold. Elias switched on his flashlight. A narrow stair dropped beneath the station. At the bottom, darkness swallowed the beam beyond a landing no wider than a doormat. The space tightened around his chest. He touched the compass again. 1, 2, 3. The German shepherd watched him. Her body was calm now that she was under the overhang, but her eyes tracked the white slope behind him. "You don't like open ground," he said. Her nose moved once. "I don't like stairs that go under mountains." For the first time, her tail shifted. Not a wag. More like acknowledgement. Elias stepped onto the first stair. The dog remained outside. He went down 4 steps and stopped. The clicking grew clearer. A mechanical relay, perhaps. The flashlight revealed gray conduit, an emergency phone box, and a wall painted with old elevation marks. Halfway down, a smear of mud crossed the concrete. It had not been there long. Elias heard the faint scrape of claws behind him. The German shepherd had entered. She stood on the top landing with all 4 paws close together, refusing to descend farther. "That's enough," he told her. "You wait there." She sat. At the bottom, Elias found the relay cabinet. Its outer switch showed OFF. Inside, however, a small analog recorder turned one narrow reel a few inches at a time. Each movement produced the click he had heard upstairs. A strip of paper fed beneath a stylus. The ink line rose and fell in short pulses. Elias leaned closer. The recorder had been manufactured before digital weather networks. It should not have been running. The backup batteries were gone, their cables cut clean at the terminals. Yet the reel continued to turn. He followed the power cord to a second conduit added behind the cabinet. Newer insulation, fresh clamps. The line disappeared through a hole drilled into the wall. On the cabinet shelf lay a torn nylon tab. It was the same faded blue as the dog's harness. Elias picked it up. One side held the fragment of an embroidered number. 9. He climbed back toward the landing. The dog remained exactly where he had left her. When he showed her the tab, she did not sniff it. She turned her head toward the ridge and gave a low sound from her chest. Not aggression. Warning. An engine labored on the access road below. Elias extinguished the flashlight and stepped outside. Through the moving snow, he saw a white utility truck rounding the lower switchback. No county emblem marked the doors. A light bar sat dark on the roof. The driver slowed when he saw Elias at marker 9. The German shepherd moved behind Elias's left leg. The truck stopped 50 yards away. A man in a red insulated jacket opened the door but did not step out. He watched Elias, then the dog, then the cut cable lying in the snow. "Station's closed," Elias called. The man raised one gloved hand. "Didn't know anybody was up here." His tone was friendly, but his eyes stayed on the dog. "Now you do." The man smiled without showing teeth. Weather can turn fast on this pass. I've noticed. You find that shepherd wandering. Elias looked down. The dog's body had gone rigid. I found her tied to county equipment. The smile disappeared. The man's gaze dropped to the harness, where the patches had been cut away. Could belong to a rescue outfit. Better let professionals handle her. What outfit? The man did not answer. Instead, he closed the truck door and drove uphill past the station. Elias turned to watch. There was no public road beyond Blackglass, only an old maintenance track ending near the avalanche control sheds. The utility truck continued until the snow hit it. Elias looked at the dog. She touched her nose against the torn blue tab in his hand. 3 times. Marker 9, he said. Her ears lifted. Elias took the county sales packet from the snow. The signature page had gone wet along one edge. He had planned to drive it to the clerk before noon. He folded it once more and slid it into his coat. The German shepherd followed him to the station porch but stopped when he opened the truck door. She looked across the exposed parking area, then back toward the service entrance. All right, Elias said. We do this your way. He brought the truck around, parking it close enough that the building blocked most of the open slope. The dog crossed the narrow strip of snow and climbed into the passenger seat. She turned twice before lying down, but her head stayed up. Elias started the engine and adjusted the heater toward her paws. When he lifted the harness strap to check for identification, he found writing on the inside, in black permanent ink, a radio frequency. Below it 2 words. Micah, Team 9. Elias read the line again. The utility truck reappeared on the upper track, moving faster now. It did not stop at the station. It passed above them and disappeared down the eastern side of the pass, where no marked road existed on the county map. Micah raised her head and watched until the sound faded. Elias placed one hand on the steering wheel and the other over the compass beneath his coat. He had come to Blackglass to close a property sale and finish the last obligation tying him to Colorado. Instead, a dog erased from her own uniform had led him to a powered recorder beneath a station with no electricity, while a stranger drove a road the county claimed did not exist. Elias looked at the wet sales packet. Then he turned off the engine. We're not leaving yet. Micah lowered her head to the seat, but her eyes remained open. At that moment, beneath the station floor, the analog reel stopped clicking. A second later, a red indicator lamp came on inside the dead relay cabinet. Someone somewhere else on the mountain had just realized the station was occupied. Elias did not move for nearly a minute. The station heater ticked as it cooled. Micah's breathing softened beside him, but one ear stayed angled toward the floor. He pulled his phone from his pocket. 1 bar of service appeared vanished, then returned. He photographed the harness, the cut cable, the torn tab, and the fresh scratches on the service door. Old habit made him include a fixed reference in each frame. The marker number, the station clock, the compass laid beside the evidence. He had learned long ago that memory became unreliable when fear and exhaustion entered a room. The county non-emergency line rang 6 times before a dispatcher answered. Blackglass Pass Weather Station, Elias said. I found a restrained working dog, and evidence someone has accessed the lower utility level. The dispatcher asked whether anyone was injured. The dog is cold and favoring one paw. No people injured. Do you know who owns the animal? Her harness, says Micah Team 9. The patches were cut off. A pause followed. Keyboard keys clicked in the background. Sir Summit Sentinel Foundation operates canine rescue teams in that district. I can notify them. Micah lifted her head at the name spoken through the phone. Elias watched her pupils widen. Do not send anyone from that organization until an animal control officer or deputy is present, he said. The dispatcher's tone changed. Is there an immediate threat? I don't know yet. That is why I'm asking for an independent officer. She placed him on hold. The thin music lasted less than 30 seconds before the line went dead. Elias looked at the screen. No service. From the ridge came a dull metallic bang, followed by the brief whine of a motor. The sound traveled through the station walls and into the floor beneath his boots. Micah stood in the passenger seat. Easy. She did not look at him. Her nose pointed toward the sealed stairwell. Elias understood then that the recorder had not simply stopped. Someone had shut it off remotely after hearing or seeing that the station was no longer empty. He opened the truck's center console and removed a paper road map, a pencil, and an old handheld radio. The radio batteries were weak, but the device still powered on. He entered the frequency written inside Micah's harness. Static filled the cab. Then beneath it, a voice spoke 2 clipped words. "Bay clear." The transmission ended. Micah touched her nose to the radio 3 times. Elias marked the time on the map. Whatever Team 9 had been, someone was still using its channel. By the time Deputy Mara Keene reached Blackglass Pass, snow had erased the tire marks left by the white utility truck. Her county cruiser stopped beside Elias's pickup shortly after 2 in the afternoon. She stepped out, wearing a brown winter uniform beneath a dark parka, one hand resting near the radio clipped to her shoulder. She was in her early 50s, compact, steady, and visibly annoyed by the condition of the road. "You, Elias Vance." He nodded. "I had to come through the south gate because the west approach is closed. Dispatch said you found a dog." Micah watched from behind the truck seat. Elias had wrapped her in the blanket and placed a bowl of water on the floorboard. She had drunk only after he turned his face away. She was cable-locked to marker 9. Keene looked toward the beacon. "You cut her loose." "Yes. Anything else?" Elias handed her the torn blue tab in a clear sandwich bag. This was inside the relay room. Same material as the harness. Keene accepted it by the edges. "You carry evidence bags in your truck. I carry lunch bags. Today, one became evidence." Her mouth almost smiled. He showed her the service door, the fresh scratches, and the dead recorder. The red indicator lamp had gone dark again. Keene photographed the cabinet and examined the new conduit, but she did not touch it. "County records say this lower level was decommissioned in 2020, she said. "Somebody disagrees. Or somebody reused an old cable run. That is what I would like to know." Keene returned upstairs. Micah had moved to the edge of the passenger seat. When the deputy approached, the dog watched her without retreating. "Pretty animal," Keene said. "Thin, though. Cold stiffness in the right front paw. No obvious fracture. Animal control is coming from Pine Creek. Veterinary office is meeting us there." Elias placed one hand against Micah's shoulder. The dog's muscles tightened at the words, "animal control." "She stays with me until the vet examines her." Keene studied him. "That is not automatically your decision." "No, it is hers." The deputy looked at the cut harness and the cable marks around the chest strap. "For now, you drive. I follow." The descent from Blackglass took nearly an hour. Snow packed into the shaded curves, while sunlight flashed across the exposed switchbacks. Micah remained on the passenger seat, bracing herself when the truck crossed open sections of road. Each time the mountain dropped away beyond the guardrail, she lowered her body and pressed her shoulder against Elias's arm. He did not reassure her with words. He drove slower. Pine Creek Veterinary Clinic occupied a low brick building beside the county road. Dr. Lena Ortiz met them in the rear entrance, where the floor had a rubber surface and no other animals were waiting. "Bring her straight in," she said. Micah stopped at the threshold. The parking lot behind them was broad and exposed. Wind pushed loose snow across the asphalt. Elias felt the dog's weight shift backward. He stepped inside, first turned, and waited. Micah watched him. He tapped the floor once with 2 fingers. She crossed the threshold. Dr. Ortiz noticed. "You know working dogs." Enough to avoid dragging one. The examination revealed no broken bones. Micah's paw pads were cracked and mildly frostbitten. Her weight was 12 pounds below the healthy range for her frame. A rubbed circle beneath the harness suggested she had worn it continuously for weeks. Dr. Ortiz scanned the microchip. The number appeared on the monitor. Keene called it into dispatch, while the veterinarian cleaned Micah's paws. After several minutes, the deputy's radio answered. "Registered owner is Summit Sentinel Foundation," Keene said. Status notes say, "Retired from active rescue service and transferred to private adoption 8 months ago." To whom Elias asked. Keene listened to the radio, then frowned. "No adopter listed in the state return. It only says transfer completed." Dr. Ortiz looked up. "That is unusual. A reputable organization would have contact records." "Summit Sentinel is reputable," Keene said. "At least publicly." She turned the monitor so Elias could see. The chip profile listed Micah's date of birth, vaccination history, and a certification number connected to avalanche search work. Beneath it was a note. Non-deployable anxiety response. Ilias read the words twice. Micah stood with her head under his hand while Dr. Ortiz wrapped the injured paw. What kind of anxiety, he asked. No details, Keene said. The clinic's rear door opened. Micah jerked so hard that the metal table shifted. A man entered wearing a charcoal coat over a red rescue jacket. He was tall, silver-haired, and carried himself with the ease of someone accustomed to rooms becoming quieter when he arrived. Behind him came the driver Elias had seen on the mountain. The silver-haired man removed his gloves. Deputy Keene. Doctor. I am Grant Hulbert. Keene knew the name. Elias saw it in the change of her posture. Founder of Summit Sentinel, she said. Grant's gaze went to Micah. Relief crossed his face, convincing enough that Elias might have believed it if the dog had not pressed herself against the wall. There she is, Grant said softly. We have been looking everywhere. Micah's breathing became rapid. The driver remained near the door. Grant approached slowly. Mika, come. The dog did not move. He stopped. A flash of irritation appeared and vanished. She has always been sensitive after extended searches, Grant explained. You must be Mr. Vance. Elias nodded. I am grateful you found her. Grant offered his hand. One of our transport contractors made a serious error this morning. Elias did not take it. What error leaves a dog cable-locked to an avalanche beacon? Grant lowered his hand. The vehicle lost traction near the pass. The handler secured Micah while attempting to reach a signal point. By the time he returned, she was gone. The cable was crimped closed. Standard emergency practice. The handler cut the insignia from her harness before going for help. Grant looked at the driver. The man's face remained blank. That damage may have occurred earlier, Grant said. Dr. Ortiz stepped between them. This dog is underweight and has prolonged harness abrasion. That did not occur this morning. Grant's expression softened. Micah has had trouble eating since retirement. We placed her with a rural foster who believed quiet surroundings would help. Name, Keene asked. Grant turned to her. Our office can provide the complete placement file. Your microchip return has no adapter. A clerical delay. Micah's nose touched the wall 3 times. Elias watched Grant notice the behavior. For 1 second the man looked afraid. Then he smiled again. We should take her home. Dr. Ortiz shook her head. Not until I receive proof of lawful custody and an explanation for her condition. Grant drew a folder from inside his coat. I expected that. The documents appeared complete. Incorporation papers, ownership records, insurance certificates, and a veterinary authorization signed by a clinic 2 counties away. Keene read them carefully. These establish ownership, she said. They do not explain neglect, Dr. C. Ortiz replied. Grant's voice stayed calm. There has been no neglect. Mika escaped from a foster placement 4 days ago. We tracked her through the foothills. She was secured during a weather emergency and became separated again. Elias looked at the driver. Your man told me he did not know anyone was at the station. Grant turned slightly. Cal, is that true? Cal cleared his throat. I saw the truck. I did not know who owned it. You asked whether I found the shepherd wandering, Elias said. Cal shrugged. I was trying to avoid an argument with an armed stranger. Elias was not visibly armed. Keene heard the implication. Mr. Halbert, nobody is removing the dog today. The clinic will hold her overnight while I review the records. Grant's polite mask tightened at the edges. Micah is trained rescue property, he said. Her absence creates liability. She is also evidence in a possible neglect complaint. The room went still. Grant looked at Elias. You served. It was not a question. Long enough. Then you understand how quickly people misread working animal conditions. A harness mark becomes abuse. A hard deployment becomes cruelty. People judge without knowing what the work requires. Elias thought of Aaron Vale standing in blowing snow while a supervisor insisted the window remain safe. I know the difference between hard work and being erased, he said. Grant's eyes sharpened. He put on his gloves. Deputy, I will expect an answer by tomorrow. As he passed Micah, he did not look at her. Cal followed him out. The clinic door closed. Micah's breathing slowed only after the sound of their vehicle disappeared. Keene rubbed a hand over her face. You understand the problem. The paperwork is cleaner than the dog. The paperwork may still win. Elias took the handheld radio from his coat and placed it on the counter. I entered the frequency inside her harness. Someone transmitted Bay Clear less than an hour after the station recorder was shut down. Keene looked at him. You recorded it? No, then right now it is your memory. I wrote the time. That helps, but not enough. Dr. Ortiz gave Mika a sedative-free pain treatment and prepared a quiet kennel in a back room. Elias walked the dog there. She stopped before the enclosure. He crouched beside her. I will come back in the morning. Mitsa stared at him. He set the brass compass outside the kennel door. You hold that. I want it back. Her nose touched the compass once. Elias left before he could change his mind. Outside, the snow had stopped. Deputy Keene stood beside her cruiser, speaking quietly into her phone. When she finished, she came to his truck. Summit Sentinel has 3 county contracts and a state grant review next month, she said. Grant Halberd sits on the Winter Safety Advisory Board. People here know him. That does not make his records true. No, it means accusations require more than instinct. I have a recorder under my station that should be dead. You have equipment on property jointly regulated by the county. Do not open walls. Do not remove logs. Do not go looking for a crime because you dislike the owner. Elias heard the warning. He also heard what she did not say. Wait for us. Waiting had once cost him 40 minutes. 40 minutes had become an avalanche path. A broken radio and Aaron Vale's body beneath 9 feet of snow. I understand, he said. Keene studied him as if she knew he was lying. Mr. Vance, a man who believes he is the only person willing to act, is often the most dangerous person on a mountain. The sentence followed him all the way back to Blackglass. Night arrived early. Clouds covered the ridge and the temperature dropped fast enough to frost the inside corners of the station windows. Elias connected a portable generator, warmed one room, and reviewed the photographs on his phone. The scratches on the latch, the blue tab, the altered conduit, Micah's harness. He enlarged the image of the handwritten frequency. Beneath Team 9, almost hidden beneath the seam, were 4 more characters. C4. Elias unfolded the station plans from a cabinet. The lower level showed rooms A1 through B3. No C-wing existed. He found a second plan dated 4 years later. Still no C-wing. At 9:12, the radio emitted a burst of static. Elias sat upright. A digital tone sounded, followed by a voice. Marker 9, check. He pressed the transmit key but did not speak. The voice repeated Marker 9, check. Then a second man answered. Asset recovered. Lower relay compromised. Elias released the radio. Asset recovered. They believed Mika was back in their custody. He looked toward the service door. Keene had told him not to open walls or remove logs. She had not forbidden him from reading equipment already exposed. He descended the stairs. The lower room felt smaller at night. Generator light threw hard shadows across the concrete. Elias counted 3 breaths and examined the analog recorder. The new power line entered the wall behind it. He removed no screws. He followed the conduit by touch until it disappeared beneath a loose metal cover near the floor. The cover had no seal. He lifted it. Behind it was a maintenance crawlway, barely high enough for a man on hands and knees. Cold air moved through the opening. Elias's chest tightened. He imagined the narrow space collapsing snow, loading the slope above radio static, swallowing a voice. He nearly replaced the cover. Then the handheld radio whispered from his belt. Prepare west, run before dawn. A second voice answered. Logs. Move them to C4. Elias stared into the crawlway. He should have called Keene. He should have waited for a warrant, a county engineer, and daylight. Instead, he clipped the radio to his coat, took the flashlight, and entered. The passage turned after 20 feet. Fresh drag marks scored the dust. At the bend, Elias found an old cable tray filled with newer fiber line. The wires ran toward the mountain rather than toward the station. He continued. The ceiling lowered. His shoulder brushed concrete. Breath caught beneath his ribs. He stopped and gripped the compass. 1, 2. Before the third breath, a red light appeared ahead. Someone had opened a door at the far end. Elias switched off his flashlight. Bootsteps entered the passage. He backed toward the station, moving carefully, but his heel struck a metal junction box. The clang raced through the tunnel. The boot steps stopped. "Who's there?" a man called. Elias retreated faster. Behind him, the old relay suddenly came alive. Bells sounded through the lower room. A warning siren began to pulse above the station. Outside, red strobes flashed across the snow. The mountain answered with a low crack. Elias emerged from the crawlway and climbed the stairs as the building shook. Snow moved somewhere on the western slope. Not a full avalanche, but a controlled release large enough to close the road. He reached the porch and saw the white utility truck parked above marker 9. Cal stood beside it, holding a remote controller. "You should have gone home," he shouted over the siren. Then the slope between them broke loose. A wall of powder crossed the upper road, cutting Elias off from the valley. By the time the air cleared, the truck was gone. His phone showed no service. The county road below had vanished beneath fresh snow. On the handheld radio, Grant Halberd's voice came through with perfect calm. "Blackglass Station. This is Summit Sentinel Control. Remain inside. Rescue is being dispatched." Elias looked at the line of debris blocking the road. Grant had created the emergency. Now he intended to arrive as the hero. The road remained buried until noon the next day, which gave Grant Halberd 12 hours to tell the county his version first. According to Summit Sentinel's official incident report, an unstable cornice had released above Blackglass Pass during a routine safety check. Their team had attempted to contact Elias, discovered the road blocked, and offered assistance. The report made no mention of Cal, the remote controller, or the radio transmission ordering the logs. Moved to C4. Elias read the summary on Deputy Keene's tablet after a county plow finally reached the station. "They filed this at 2:17 in the morning," Keene said, before the road crew had even assessed the slide. "Efficient. Or prepared." She looked toward the upper slope. Fresh fracture lines showed where the snow had broken. "The avalanche team says it could have released naturally." "Could have." "You saw Cal with a controller?" "Yes." "No photograph?" "No." "No recording of Halberd's voice?" "No." Keene closed the tablet. "Then we keep facts separate from conclusions." Elias wanted to argue, but Micah's absence had left him with a pressure behind the ribs he did not trust. He had returned to the clinic at first light, only to find a county hold on the dog. Summit Sentinel had petitioned for immediate release, and the clinic could not transfer her to Elias without a custody decision. "Can I see her?" he had asked. Dr. Ortiz had led him to the kennel. Micah stood before he reached the door. The brass compass lay beside her front paws. When he crouched, she pushed it through the bars with her nose. "I said hold it," Elias told her. She touched the compass 3 times, then looked toward the rear exit. He understood. Keeping it was not the point. Returning it was. Now at Blackglass, Keene inspected the crawlway while a county engineer examined the relay. Elias remained upstairs as ordered. He watched through the window while workers cleared the road, and Summit Sentinel vehicles waited at the lower gate as though they owned the mountain. A faded green pickup arrived behind the county trucks. A woman with close-cropped gray hair stepped out carrying a hard radio case. She wore insulated work pants, an orange shell, and a pair of old aviation headphones around her neck. Keene met her outside. The two spoke for several minutes before the woman came into the station. "You are Elias Vance," she said. "And you are Nora Bell, County Emergency Communications." Her voice was low and direct. She set the case on a table and looked around the room without admiration. "You transmitted on frequency 155.685 last night. I listened. You keyed the channel twice. I did not speak. The carrier still registered." Elias crossed his arms. "Then somebody keeps records." Nora looked at him for a long moment. "Somebody used to." She opened the hard case. Inside was a spectrum analyzer, 2 cables, and a battered notebook held together by black tape. "That frequency belonged to Summit Sentinel Team 9, she said. "It was retired 18 months ago. Micah's harness says Team 9. "I know. You know the dog." "I dispatched her." The answer changed the room. Nora sat at the station console and connected her analyzer to the old receiver. "Micah was one of the best close-range scent dogs we had. Not the fastest, not the most aggressive. She would stop at the edge of exposed slopes and wait for her handler's shoulder signal. People complained it cost seconds. Maybe it saved her life. It saved mine once. Nora's hands paused over the controls. 2 winters ago, we lost radio contact with a team near Long Needle Ridge. Micah refused the direct approach. Her handler cursed her and tried to pull her across. She backed out of the harness. 10 seconds later, the cornice dropped. Elias pictured the rubbed circle under the blue straps. What happened to the handler? Transferred. Then Micah was labeled anxious. Who labeled her? Nora looked toward the window where Grant's red-jacketed personnel stood beyond the county barricade. You already know. Deputy Keene entered. Nora has agreed to evaluate the signal system. She is not here as an accuser. Nora's expression did not change. I stopped being an accuser after the board erased my complaint. Keene shut the door behind her. Tell him what you told me. Nora opened the taped notebook. Pages of handwritten dates, call signs, and weather readings filled it. 18 months ago, I noticed Team 9 appearing in 2 deployment summaries on the same morning, she said. One report placed Micah at Red Elk Basin. Another listed her at Sterling Cut, 140 miles away. Clerical error, Elias asked. That is what I was told. Then it happened again with Team 4. After that, I began copying dispatch times by hand. She turned the notebook so he could see paired entries circled in red. I sent digital logs to the board's compliance officer. My account was disabled that afternoon. The copy I mailed to the state grant office was returned because Summit Sentinel had changed the review contact without notice. You kept the notebook. I was old enough to learn that paper becomes valuable when computers suddenly forget. Keene leaned against the counter. Why did you not go public? Because a radio log proves a call sign transmitted. It does not prove a rescue did not happen. Grant had photographs, affidavits, invoices, and grateful families. I had timing discrepancies and a reputation for being difficult. You are difficult, Keene said. So are locked doors. Elias almost smiled. Nora connected the analyzer. The retired frequency showed no current carrier. Whoever used it last night is silent now, she said. But the lower relay may hold analog timing marks if the stylus paper was not removed. Keene pointed toward the stairwell. We inspect together. Elias went last. The lower room tightened around him again. Micah was not at the landing. No steady breathing, no weight behind him. He reached for the compass and counted. Nora noticed, but did not comment. The analog recorder still contained several feet of paper. Keene photographed the entire mechanism before Nora touched it. Then Nora advanced the reel by hand. Black pulses crossed the paper at regular intervals. Several were paired with small triangular marks. What are those? Elias asked. Remote gate acknowledgments, Nora said. Old avalanche stations used them to confirm that a command reached a field relay. Can you tell where the command originated? Not from the strip alone, but I can tell when. She compared the marks to Elias's written times. The recorder accepted a remote command, 19 seconds before you heard Bay clear. Then another at the time of the release. Keene's face hardened. Meaning someone triggered equipment through this station. Meaning the station received commands. We still need the source. Nora followed the new conduit into the crawlway entrance, but did not enter. This line is not county standard. Fiber jacket is private contractor blue. Summit Sentinel uses the same supplier. That is not proof, Keene said. No, it is direction. They emerged into daylight. The wind had dropped. For the first time since the storm, the pass appeared gentle. Sunlight moved across the fresh snow, revealing every ridge and depression. Nora refused to walk directly across the open lot. She followed the station wall until she reached Elias's truck. You do not like exposed ground either, he said. I respect it. That sounded rehearsed. It is. She opened her notebook again. The C4 mark you found is probably not a room. Summit Sentinel uses Bay codes for equipment caches. C-Series means legacy analog storage. Where? If I knew, I would have gone there before they fired me. A county animal control van appeared on the road. Behind it came Dr. Ortiz's vehicle. Micah sat in the rear compartment wearing a clean wrap on her paw and a plain red leash. When the door opened, she looked past everyone until she saw Elias. Her tail moved once. Grant Halbert arrived moments later in a black sport utility vehicle with an attorney. The attorney carried a court order granting Summit Sentinel temporary custody pending review. Keene read it and swore under her breath. Grant approached Mika with practiced patience. Come, girl. Micah remained beside Dr. Ortiz. The attorney said the foundation has legal ownership. Dr. Ortiz handed Keene a medical report. And I have documented neglect indicators. Indicators are not a finding. Grant looked at Elias. This has become unnecessarily adversarial. You tied a dog to a mountain. I did no such thing. Then help us identify who did. Grant's eyes moved to Nora. Recognition settled over his face. Nora, he said. I wondered how long it would take. She closed the notebook. You did not wonder. You changed the access codes the day I reported the duplicate deployments. I removed a disgruntled employee who mishandled confidential rescue records. You billed the state for a dog that was in 2 counties at once. Grant looked toward Keene. This is precisely why the board terminated her. Keene raised one hand. Enough. The order gives Summit Sentinel custody. It does not prevent an active neglect investigation. Micah was transferred to a secure transport crate in the Foundation vehicle. Elias stood close enough for her to see him but did not touch the crate. Grant watched from several feet away. When this is over, Grant said quietly, you will wish you had signed your sales papers and gone home. Elias met his gaze. Maybe. Micah pressed her nose to the crate door 3 times. Grant's expression changed again. Elias saw it clearly now. The behavior meant something Grant understood. The vehicles left the station. Nora remained beside him. What do the 3 taps mean? He asked. She looked surprised. Mika did that. Whenever she is afraid or trying to draw attention to something, Nora opened the notebook and turned several pages. Her first handler trained a non-verbal confirmation. 3 touches meant the target odor was present but inaccessible. Elias looked down the road where the transport vehicle had disappeared. She touched the wall in the clinic. The radio, the compass, the crate. Objects can carry scent, or she was telling us something was behind them. Nora shook her head. Do not make her mystical. She is a dog with learned behavior, not an oracle. I know. Good. She tapped the C4 notation in his photograph. Then treat the behavior as information, not prophecy. Inside the station, they spread the old plans across the floor. Nora compared county diagrams, maintenance notes, and her dispatch maps. Elias traced the fiber route from the lower relay toward the eastern side of the pass. The line did not follow the listed utility tunnel. It cut toward a disused snow control shed beneath the upper road. West Run, Elias said. Nora nodded. That is what they called the release last night. They drove as far as the plowed road allowed, then continued on foot along the station wall and through the trees. The shed appeared after half a mile, half buried in wind-packed snow. Its door stood open. Inside, shelves had been emptied. Fresh scrape marks crossed the floor. One wall held brackets where storage reels had recently hung. Nora walked to a rusted desk and found a carbon copy invoice beneath it. Explosive charges, she said. Quantities for 6 control points. Elias examined the date. Yesterday. The county report lists 2 charges used. Where are the other 4? A noise came from outside. Mika barked once. Elias and Nora turned. The dog stood in the doorway, red leash trailing behind her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then a Foundation handler appeared between the trees, shouting her name. Micah looked at the open slope separating the shed from Elias. Her body lowered. Wind lifted snow across the gap. Elias stepped into the open first. He did not call her. He turned sideways, lowered one hand, and waited. Micah took 1 step. Then another. The handler came closer. Micah returned. The dog froze. Elias tapped his thigh once. Micah crossed the remaining distance and moved behind him. The handler stopped when he saw Nora holding the invoice and Elias photographing the empty brackets. You are trespassing on a restricted safety site, he said. Nora lifted her county identification. This shed belongs to the district. The man looked at the paper in her hand. Then he ran. Not toward the road. Toward the upper control line. Micah lunged after him, but Elias caught the trailing leash. No. She strained once, then stopped. A second later, a siren sounded from the ridge. Nora looked up sharply. That is a pre-ignition warning. No storm loading, Elias said. Then someone is not controlling snow. The shed floor vibrated beneath their boots. A charge exploded somewhere beyond the trees. Snow did not move. Instead, a plume of black smoke rose from the direction of the old relay storage building near the station. Nora's face went pale. "My paper logs," she said. They ran back through the trees. By the time they reached Blackglass, flames had consumed the small annex where Keene had temporarily stored the seized reel and copies of Nora's notebook. Fire crews were still climbing the road. Keene stood beside the building with soot across one sleeve. "The original recorder strip is safe," she said. "I moved it to my cruiser 10 minutes ago." Nora exhaled. "But your copied notebook was inside." Nora looked at the smoke. Keene held up a melted access card found near the rear door. The printed name was still visible. "Nora Bell." Elias turned toward her. Nora stared at the card as if seeing a ghost. "That badge was taken when they fired me," she said. Keene's voice stayed careful. "Then somebody kept it." Elias wanted to believe her. He also remembered Aaron Vale saying the weather supervisor had changed the report. Elias had believed him. Then he had chosen to continue anyway. Trust had not saved Aaron. Micah stood between Elias and Nora. The dog sniffed the melted badge, then moved to Nora and pressed her nose against the woman's gloved hand 3 times. Nora did not move. Elias watched Micah's body. No fear, no hesitation. Information, not prophecy. He looked at the burned annex, the duplicate invoice, and the access card planted where everyone would find it. "Grant wants us arguing about who betrayed whom," he said. Keene studied him. "You sound certain." "No, I sound tired of following the question he chose for us." Micah leaned against Nora's leg. For the first time, Nora reached down and touched the dog's head. The gesture lasted only a second, but it was enough to change what came next. The court order arrived at 6:40 the next morning, folded inside a plastic sleeve, and carried up the pass by a deputy Elias had never met. Summit Sentinel had requested emergency authority to remove Micah from Blackglass, restrict Elias from all Foundation property, and inspect the station for damage allegedly caused by his unauthorized entry into the lower relay. The judge granted the first 2 requests and scheduled the property question for the following week. Micah was asleep beneath the station table when the deputy read the order. She had spent the night there after the handler fled the snow control shed. Deputy Keene had allowed it because the Foundation transport crate had been found with an unlatched secondary gate and no handler immediately available. Grant called it an accident. Keene called it another open question. Now the answer had arrived in the form of stamped paper. Elias read the final paragraph twice. When he asked, "Foundation vehicle is 15 minutes out." Nora stood near the window with both arms folded. She had not slept. A paper cup of coffee cooled beside her radio case. "We can file a motion to suspend transfer," she said. "Lena has a medical affidavit ready. Mara can submit the relay evidence. But it will take hours." "Where will they take Micah?" "Summit Sentinel's training compound outside Red Bluff. 2 hours from here. In good weather." The deputy shifted his weight. "Mr. Vance, I am required to supervise the handover." Elias looked down. Micah was awake now. Her head rested on her front paws, but her eyes moved between the people in the room. The bandage on her right paw had been replaced. She had eaten half a bowl of chicken and rice before dawn, then carried the empty bowl to the service stair and placed it beside the sealed door. "Information, not prophecy." Elias crouched beside her. "They are going to take you somewhere for a while." Micah stood. He clipped the plain red leash to her collar. His hand remained steady until he reached the station porch and saw Grant's black vehicle approaching behind a white transport van. The wind was rising from the northwest. Fine snow skimmed the road in pale ribbons. Above Marker 9, the ridge had disappeared into cloud. Grant stepped from the sport utility vehicle wearing the same charcoal coat, this time beneath a red safety vest. Cal drove the van. 2 uniformed handlers opened the rear doors and set a reinforced crate on the snow. Grant handed the deputy a copy of the order. "I regret that it came to this," he said. Elias kept his hand on Micah's leash. "You regret witnesses." "I regret watching a traumatized man mistake suspicion for purpose." Nora came onto the porch. "That sentence must have sounded better when your attorney wrote it." Grant ignored her. "Micah belongs with trained personnel," he said. "Not at an abandoned station with a man who entered an active control tunnel during a weather event. You created that event. Then prove it. The deputy cleared his throat. We are conducting the transfer now. One handler approached Micah with a slip lead. The dog backed toward Elias's leg. He could feel the tremor through the leash. He knelt and turned her face toward him. Look here. Her eyes met his. He touched the compass beneath his coat, but instead of holding it for himself, he unclipped it from the leather cord and fastened the cord through the loop on her collar. You bring it back. Micah touched her nose to his wrist 3 times. The handler took the leash. She resisted for 1 step, then entered the crate when Elias walked beside her. He did not touch the door after it closed. He stood close enough for her to see him while the crate was loaded into the van. Grant paused before entering his vehicle. You could still sell the property, he said. The county offer remains reasonable. You know about the offer. I sit on the Winter Advisory Board. Blackglass has been discussed for years. Then you knew the lower relay was active. Grant's expression did not change. Be careful, Mr. Vance. You are building conclusions faster than facts. The vehicles pulled away. Elias watched until the van rounded the first switchback. Nora came beside him. The judge will hear the medical motion by afternoon. Afternoon is a long time. That does not authorize you to follow them. He looked at the cloud swallowing the ridge. They are not taking the county road. The transport van had turned left at the old quarry fork away from Red Bluff. Nora saw it too. That route reconnects below the eastern gate, she said. Maybe they want to avoid the plows. Or they are going to C4. We do not know where C4 is. Micah does. Nora stepped in front of him. Listen to me. Grant expects you to chase. He has spent 2 days making you look unstable and dangerous. Every time you ignore procedure, you finish his argument for him. Elias heard her. He even believed her. Then the handheld radio on the table came alive. Transport clear of West Camera, a voice said. Another voice answered. Proceed Upper Bay. Elias was already moving. Nora caught his sleeve. Call Mara. No service on the upper route. Then use the station phone. By the time anyone responds, they will have moved whatever is in that bay. Or they will have photographed you trespassing again. He pulled free. What would you do if that were your dog? Nora's face hardened. I would do the difficult thing and make sure the evidence survived my anger. But Elias was no longer listening. He took the pickup up the quarry fork without chains. The road narrowed immediately. Snow deepened beneath the tires, hiding ruts and stones. Wind struck the truck broadside as the route climbed above the trees. Visibility dropped from 100 yards to 30, then 15. Elias saw the transport van's tail lights once through the whiteout. He accelerated. His left knee pressed against the door as the truck slid around a curve. The rear tires lost traction, recovered, then lost it again. He gripped the wheel harder. Ahead, the red lights vanished. Aaron Vale's voice entered the cab as clearly as if the man sat beside him. We still have 40 minutes. Elias had believed the route could be completed in 22. He had believed experience made him the exception to the mountain. When the first slab fractured, he had ordered the team to continue toward a rock outcrop instead of retreating. Aaron had followed the command. The truck struck a drift. The front end swung toward the open edge of the road. Elias turned into the slide. The tires found nothing. Snow burst across the windshield. The passenger side dropped, and for one suspended second, the truck leaned above a slope that disappeared into cloud. He could not breathe. His right hand searched for the compass. It was gone. Micah had it. The truck settled against a buried guard stone with a metallic groan. Elias stared through the windshield. He could continue, reverse straighten, gain speed, and force the drift before more snow accumulated. The old part of him had already calculated it. Then he saw Aaron's glove lying on the snow and his memory palm up, fingers curled as if still waiting for help. Elias released the steering wheel. 1 breath. 2. 3. He shut off the engine. For 10 minutes he did nothing except wait for his heartbeat to slow. Then he called Nora on the handheld radio. I am stuck above Quarry Turn. Her answer came immediately. Are you injured? No vehicle stable. For now, do not move it. I am sending the county snowcat. He closed his eyes. I made the wrong call. Yes, Nora said. Now make the next one correctly. The snowcat reached him an hour later. By then, the whiteout had thickened, and the transport van was long gone. County workers pulled the pickup back onto the road and escorted Elias to Blackglass. He expected anger from Keene. Instead, he found the station surrounded by fire vehicles. The annex had burned the day before. Now the small equipment vault on the eastern side had been forced open. The original analog reel was gone from Keene's cruiser, along with the carbon invoice and the torn blue tab. "My car was locked," Keene said. "Window was not broken. Whoever opened it used a cloned electronic key." Nora stood near the lower relay, staring at the floor. A second access card had been found inside the cruiser. Her name was printed on it. Elias entered the station and removed his wet coat. Shame and cold sat heavily in his shoulders. "I gave them time," he said. Keene looked at him. "You also gave them a public record of dangerous driving during an active warning." "I know. Grant's attorney already filed it." Nora held out her hand. "Your truck camera." "What?" "You installed a forward camera last year." "I saw the cable. It records to a memory card. Then, your wrong decision may still have captured the transport route." They removed the card and opened it on the station computer. Most of the video showed snow and windshield wipers. Near the quarry fork, however, the transport van appeared clearly enough to read the rear identification number. Nora enlarged the image. "That van was retired from Summit Sentinel service 2 years ago," she said. "Who owns it now?" Keene asked. Nora searched old procurement files. Halberd Mountain Logistics. Private company. Same registered address as Grant's brother-in-law. The next frame showed the van turning past a sign, half buried in snow. "Upper Bay authorized blast crews only." Keene called the judge's clerk and requested an emergency search order. This time, the evidence was not a memory. It was a time-stamped county road image connected to a vehicle omitted from Grant's custody filing. The request was being reviewed when Dr. Ortiz called. "Micah is not at Red Bluff," she said over speakerphone. "I contacted the facility listed in the court papers. They were told the transfer was canceled." Elias looked at Keene. The deputy was already reaching for her coat. They assembled at the eastern gate just before dusk. Keene, 2 deputies, Nora, Elias, and a county avalanche technician named Sam Rourke. The search order authorized entry to the upper maintenance bay and recovery of the dog. The gate chain had been cut. Beyond it, tire tracks climbed into the trees. They traveled in the snowcat. Elias sat near the rear hands, resting on his knees. No one spoke about his earlier attempt. He did not need them to. The upper bay consisted of 3 concrete garages built into the mountain. The first held an empty loader. The second contained explosive control equipment and 6 new remote initiators. The third door stood open. Inside was the transport crate. Empty. The compass lay on the floor. Elias picked it up. The leather cord had been cut, not unclipped. Micah's tracks led through a rear service passage and out onto the slope. Human boot prints followed. "Why would they let her out?" Keene asked. Nora examined the crate latch. They did not. She pushed the secondary gate after someone failed to pin it. The tracks crossed a narrow shelf and disappeared in blowing snow. Elias wanted to follow immediately. This time, he looked at Sam Rourke. "Is the shelf safe?" Sam studied the slope with a probe and inclinometer. "For one person at a time. Stay in my track. No sudden load." They moved in sequence. Halfway across, Micah barked from below. Elias saw her 30 yards down the slope beside a cluster of stunted trees. A man in a red jacket approached from the opposite side holding a catchpole. Micah backed away until the trees ended, and open snow spread behind her. She froze. The man advanced. "Micah," Elias called once. Her head turned. He could not run to her. Sam's warning held him in place. Elias stepped carefully into the open section of the shelf, then stopped. He lowered himself to one knee and placed the compass on the snow. Mitza stared at it. The handler reached with the pole. She darted sideways, crossed 10 yards of exposed slope, and reached Elias. Her body struck his chest hard enough to push him backward. He wrapped one arm around her harness. The handler turned and fled toward the trees. Keene shouted for him to stop. He disappeared. Micah trembled against Elias. He attached a rope lead and checked her paws. No new injury. Beneath her collar, tucked against the fur, was a thin metal tag he had not seen before. She touched it with her nose 3 times. Elias removed it. Stamped into the surface were the words Bay C4 and a row of 6 numbers. Nora looked over his shoulder. "That is not an equipment tag," she said. "It is a mechanical lock code." "Then where's the door?" Micah stood and pulled gently downhill. Sam tested the snow. "We do not follow tonight. Light is going. Wind is loading the lower bowl, and I will not recover bodies because a dog knows a route." Elias looked at Micah. Her ears were forward. The leash remained taut. Every part of him wanted to continue. He remembered the truck leaning above the drop. Then he turned back toward the bay. "We wait for daylight." Micah resisted for 1 second. Elias tapped his leg. She came with him. At the station that night, Nora used the lock code to search archived county inventories. The number matched no listed facility. Keene ran it through property records. Nothing. At 11:30, the station computer received a remote access request from Nora's former Summit Sentinel credentials. The screen displayed her name. Elias looked at her. "You said the account was disabled." It was. The request came again. Then the lower relay activated. A file began transferring from the station to an external address. Nora moved to disconnect the cable, but Elias caught her wrist. "What if that is what they expect?" She stared at him. "You think I am doing this. I think someone wants me to think you are." "Do you?" He did not answer quickly enough. Nora pulled her hand away. The transfer completed. Every monitor went black. When emergency power returned, the digital copies of the station plans were gone. So were Elias's photographs. He checked his phone. The images had been erased through the connected computer backup. Only the paper map remained. Nora closed her radio case. "You should have let me cut the line. You said evidence had to survive our anger, and your suspicion just destroyed it." She walked out into the night. Elias did not follow. Micah stood near the door, watching Nora cross the narrow protected path beside the station wall. The dog whined once, then looked at Elias. He had made the wrong choice twice in one day. First by moving too fast, then by refusing to move at all. Micah went to the table and pushed the metal C4 tag across the floor until it touched his boot. Elias picked it up. On the reverse side, beneath years of scratches, someone had etched a date. It was the date of Aaron Vale's death. Nora returned before dawn, carrying a cardboard archive box and an anger cold enough to outlast the weather. She placed the box on the station table without removing her coat. "You were right about one thing," she said. "Someone wanted your suspicion pointed at me." Elias stood beside the cold stove. Micah sat between them, the metal C4 tag on the floor near her paws. "I should have trusted you." "No, you should have followed the evidence. Trust is not a substitute for that." Nora opened the box. Inside were payroll sheets, calibration forms, and photocopies of handwritten dispatch cards. "After I left, I remembered the county library received old winter safety records when Summit Sentinel digitized its archive. The foundation assumed nobody would read paper from 15 years ago." She lifted one form. The date matched, the numbers scratched into the tag. Elias felt his mouth go dry. "That was the day Aaron Vale died." "I know. How I searched your service record after I saw the tag." Nora's voice softened by a fraction. "Your training unit contracted local avalanche, forecasting through Halberd Mountain Logistics. Grant's company before the foundation became his public face." Elias took the form. The upper section listed snow density, wind loading, and stability tests for a military winter mobility exercise. The original rating had been marked high risk. A second line, written in different ink, changed it to moderate. Beside the alteration were the initials G. H. Elias read the form again, slower. "We were told the forecast improved." "It did not," Nora said. "The digital file you received probably reflected the altered line." He saw Aaron fastening his helmet. He heard himself say they still had time. For 11 years, Elias had believed his own impatience changed a dangerous mission into a fatal one. That belief was not wrong. He had still chosen to continue. But someone had changed the information beneath that choice. "Why would Grant lower the risk?" he asked. Nora removed another record. The contract paid a completion bonus if the exercise proceeded. Halberd Mountain Logistics was close to bankruptcy. The company received the bonus 3 days after the accident. Keene entered from the service stair with a county technician. She listened without interrupting, then examined the copies. "This is enough to reopen the contract review," she said. "Not enough to prove criminal intent." "It proves a pattern," Nora replied. Grant learned that changing one number could protect an institution and bury responsibility. Summit Sentinel grew from the settlement and publicity after the accident. Elias looked at her sharply. The foundation was created because of Aaron. Publicly, it was created in memory of Grant's younger brother who died in an avalanche years earlier. But the first major donations came after your training accident. Grant appeared in interviews as the safety expert who warned the military about inadequate preparation. Elias gave a short, empty laugh. "He changed the report and blamed us." Micah stood and pressed her shoulder against his leg. The contact did not make the truth easier. It kept him in the room. Keene placed the C4 tag in an evidence envelope. "We still need the bay." Micah looked toward the eastern wall. At first light, they returned to the upper garages with Sam Rourke and a state grant investigator who had arrived during the night. The wind had eased. A pale blue sky opened above the pass, hard and clear after the storm. Micah stepped out of the snowcat but stopped where the trees ended. The route to the lower bowl crossed 40 yards of open snow. Elias attached a long line to her harness. "Your choice," he said. Sam marked a safe path with flags. Elias followed directly behind him. At the midpoint, he turned and faced Micah. She remained at the trees. He did not call. He knelt and laid one glove on the snow. Micah lowered her head, took 3 quick breaths, and crossed in a straight line to him. When she arrived, she touched the glove 3 times and continued downhill as soon as he stood. The team followed an old control cable buried beneath the snow. It led to a rock wall partly screened by dwarf spruce. Nothing resembled a door until Micah began working along the base nose, moving close to the stone. She stopped at a vertical seam and touched it 3 times. Nora cleared snow from a recessed steel panel. 6 numbered wheels waited beneath a hinged cover. The tag code opened the lock. The door moved inward with the slow release of compressed air. Bay C4 was not a room so much as a tunnel-sized archive built behind the avalanche control line. Racks of mechanical recorders filled the walls. Steel cabinets stood in numbered rows. Old film canisters, paper dispatch cards, magnetic tapes, and explosive control logs had been stored in an environment kept dry by passive vents. Sam whistled softly. They kept everything. Nora switched on her flashlight. Not for history. For leverage. The first cabinet contained duplicate invoices. The second held grant applications. Each rescue deployment had a packet: weather report, call-out, time dog identification, handler, signature, photograph, and reimbursement total. The documents were too perfect. Nora selected a packet labeled Team 9 Red Elk Basin. The photograph showed Micah beside a snow trench wearing the same blue harness. The printed date was 14 months earlier. She opened a second packet from the same day. Team 9, Sterling Cut. A different photograph showed another sable German shepherd whose face had been partly turned from the camera. The identification number was Micah's. "She was billed twice," Keene said. "More than twice." Nora searched the shelves by date. Team 9 appeared across 3 counties during a single 48-hour period. In several packets, the dog changed coat pattern, sex, or age, but the certification number remained constant. The grant investigator photographed each file where it lay. Elias moved deeper into the bay. Micah followed, sniffing the lower cabinets. She stopped beside a crate marked Retired Assets. Inside were collars, harnesses, microchip readers, and stacks of cut insignia patches. Beneath them lay transfer forms for 11 dogs. Every form listed a private adopter. None included an address. Dr. Ortiz had been right. The dogs were not retired through legitimate placement. They had been removed from the active roster, while their identities remained useful for billing. "What happened to them?" Elias asked. Nora read the transport codes. "Some went to a training annex near the Utah line. Some have no destination." Micah sniffed one collar and gave a low whine. Elias did not tell himself she knew the missing dog. Scent could remain on leather. A familiar kennel handler, cleaning solution, or animal might have triggered the response. The meaning mattered less than the fact that real animals had been reduced to reusable numbers. Keene opened a ledger labeled Incident Support. The first pages listed legitimate rescues and expenses. Later pages changed. Road closures appeared on dates with no severe weather. Explosive charges were billed as avalanche control, but linked to private training photographs. Foundation teams were reimbursed for emergency deployment to incidents created by their own controlled releases. Grant had built a loop. Trigger a closure, dispatch his teams, document a response, receive public money, and use the resulting visibility to attract donations. He made the emergencies, Sam said. Not all of them, Nora replied. Enough to keep the machine alive. The Grant investigator found a folder of internal board minutes. One entry recorded Grant's argument against closing the K-9 program after funding declined. If we report reduced deployment volume, the state will cut the grant. Once cut, it will never return. Temporary activity adjustments are justified to preserve long-term rescue capacity. Elias read the sentence aloud. Keene said, "That is the language people use when they want theft to sound like stewardship." A mechanical clock clicked behind them. Micah's head snapped toward the rear wall. 3 green lights came on above a cabinet. Nora crossed the room. Remote system wake up. The old recorders began turning one by one. Paper advanced beneath metal styluses. A red light flashed over the entrance. Sam checked his field receiver. Control network is arming. Can Grant trigger charges from here? Keene asked. Not from inside the bay, but the bay is tied to the control line. If he sends a full west-run sequence, the release path crosses this entrance. The Grant investigator looked toward the heavy door. How long? Sam examined the pulse interval. This is only a diagnostic cycle. The radio on Keene's shoulder crackled. A dispatcher's voice reported that Summit Sentinel had issued a public weather advisory for Blackglass Pass. Severe overnight loading. Emergency avalanche work scheduled at dawn. Sam stared at the clear sky outside the tunnel. There is no overnight loading forecast. Nora pulled a dispatch card from the active printer. He is building the record before he does it. The card listed an authorized release at 5:40 the next morning. Target: West Run 4. Debris zone. Upper Bay access and Lower Bowl. Elias looked around C4. Paper film and analog tapes filled the room. A single major slide could bury the entrance beneath 30 feet of snow and rock. By spring, water damage would destroy what remained. Keene radioed for a state explosive response team and ordered the pass closed to everyone except county personnel. The answer came back that Summit Sentinel held delegated authority over emergency avalanche operations until the county board formally suspended it. Then suspend it, she said. The board chair cannot be reached. Nora gave a bitter laugh. Grant is the vice chair. The investigator began cataloging priority evidence for removal. They had 1 snowcat and limited cargo space. Every box left behind might be lost. Elias found the original weather calibration folder from Aaron's accident. He held it for several seconds, then placed it in the first evidence case. Not because it mattered more than the missing dogs. Because it showed where Grant had learned the method. Micah moved to the entrance and looked across the open bowl. She was no longer trembling. Her ears turned toward a faint engine above them. A red rescue helicopter passed over the ridge. Summit Sentinel markings covered its side. It circled once, but did not land. Grant's voice came through the control radio. County personnel inside. C4, you are occupying an active explosive zone. Evacuate immediately. Keene pressed transmit. Grant Halberd, all avalanche operations at Blackglass are suspended pending criminal investigation. You do not have authority to issue that order. I have probable cause that your organization fabricated deployment records and created hazardous closures. Pause. Then Grant answered, you have misunderstood preservation records designed for continuity training. Nora took the microphone. You used Micah's certification number in 3 counties on the same day. Grant's voice lost some of its calm. Nora, step away from that equipment. She is not your employee, Keene said. No, Grant replied. She is a dismissed technician with a documented history of unauthorized access, and Elias Vance is a former operator whose negligence killed a man on this mountain range. Elias felt the old guilt rise. Micah turned from the entrance and stood in front of him. Grant continued. You are trusting people who need me to be guilty because the alternative is facing what they did. Elias took the microphone. The report said high risk before you changed it. Silence followed. No denial. Only the faint beat of helicopter blades. You found the legacy file, Grant said at last. I found the first time you decided an institution mattered more than the truth. You know nothing about what was at stake. A completion bonus. A company with 37 employees. Families. Contracts that would have collapsed. Your unit demanded a forecast that allowed training to continue. And you gave them one. I gave them a usable assessment. Aaron Vale died under it. Grant's reply came quietly. Men die after making choices, Mr. Vance. You of all people should understand that. The transmission ended. The helicopter turned east. Sam looked at the active panel. He does not need to be here to trigger the system. The remote initiators can receive from the ridge repeater. Can we disable them? Keen asked. Not all before dawn. There are multiple charge lines and we do not know which ones he altered. Nora pointed to an analog patchboard near the rear. C4 can interrupt the command acknowledgement. Without a return, signal protocol should block ignition. Should Elias asked. If Grant follows protocol. No one believed he would. They loaded the most important records into the Snowcat and sealed duplicates in weatherproof cases. The state investigator departed with Keen's deputy to begin authentication off-site. Keen stayed unwilling to leave the bay while Grant retained control of the mountain. Near sunset, Elias walked Mika back across the open snow toward the station. She followed his footprints without stopping. At marker 9, she turned and looked toward the ridge repeater. A small red lamp blinked against the darkening sky. The lower relay clicked beneath the station. Once, twice. Then a printer produced a new command card. Nora read it beneath the utility light. The scheduled release had been moved forward. 4:15 in the morning. Before the state team could arrive, before the county board could meet, before sunrise gave them a clear view of the charge lines. Grant was not waiting until dawn. He was waiting until the mountain was dark enough to hide what he intended to bury. At 3:10 in the morning, the repeater on Blackglass Ridge stopped accepting county override codes. Nora tried the sequence twice from the station console. Each attempt returned the same mechanical tone. Access denied. Grant replaced the county key, she said. Sam Rourke stood over a map of the charge lines. If he sends the release through his private network, the control house will route it directly to the field initiators. C4's acknowledgement block will slow the process, but it may not stop it. Deputy Keen checked her watch. State response is 40 minutes out. We have 65 minutes until the scheduled ignition, Nora said. Assuming he keeps the schedule. Elias tightened the straps on his pack. Micah stood beside the service door wearing the plain harness Dr. Ortiz had provided. The blue Team 9 harness remained sealed as evidence. Keen looked at him. You are not going alone. I did not say I was. It was the first time he had answered that question correctly without being forced. The Ridge Control House sat 800 feet above the station, reachable by a maintenance road that crossed two avalanche paths. The Snowcat could carry them to the first gate, but wind loading had made the final half-mile unsafe for the heavy vehicle. Sam led. Keen followed with Nora. Elias and Micah came last, attached by a long line only when the terrain narrowed. The sky was moonless. Their headlamps illuminated snow crystals moving through the dark like ash. Mika hesitated at the first open traverse. Elias stepped ahead of her and waited. She followed. At the second traverse, the route entered a narrow rock cut. Elias's breathing tightened as the walls closed around them. He touched the compass at his chest, then felt Mika's shoulder against his knee. He continued. The control house appeared behind a bank of floodlights. Two Summit Sentinel vehicles were parked outside. A red helicopter rested on the pad with its blades tied down. Cal stood near the entrance holding a shotgun pointed at the ground. Keen raised her badge. Cal Mercer set the weapon down. He looked toward the control house window. Grant stood behind the glass. Cal's fingers tightened around the stock. Do not make this worse, Keen said. It is not loaded, he replied. Then putting it down should be easy. Cal lowered the shotgun into the snow and stepped away. Keen cuffed him, while Sam checked the weapon. Loaded. One round chambered. Grant opened the control house door before they could force it. He wore a red rescue jacket over a white shirt, as though he had left a board meeting rather than prepared an illegal explosive release. Behind him, Banks of monitors displayed slope cameras, weather instruments, and digital maps of the charge network. "You have crossed an active hazard zone without authorization," he said. Keene entered first. "You are under investigation for evidence, destruction, fraud, animal neglect, and reckless endangerment. Step away from the console." Grant looked past her at Elias and Mika. "You brought the dog back." "She came back," Elias said. Grant's expression tightened. "That animal is not safe on exposed terrain. Her hesitation can cost lives." Her hesitation recognized a cornice before your handler did. She broke deployment discipline. She refused to die on command. Nora moved toward the communications rack. Grant placed one hand over a covered switch. "Do not touch the system," he said. "The western slab is loaded." Sam examined the live readings. "Wind loading is moderate. There is no immediate release threshold. You are looking at county sensors. Our upper array shows critical instability. Show me the raw feed." Grant tapped a screen. A graph appeared with a sharp rise in load during the previous hour. Nora leaned closer. "That is generated data. It is modeled. It has identical noise intervals every 6 minutes. Real sensors do not repeat imperfections on schedule." Grant's calm finally cracked. "Modeled data guides decisions when field instruments fail." "The field instruments did not fail," Nora said. "You disabled their return line." Keene stepped toward him. "Move away from the console." Grant removed his hand from the covered switch but did not retreat. "You think this is about money," he said. "All of you do. Because that is simpler." He looked at the wall of photographs behind the console. Rescue teams stood beside helicopters, snowcats, and families wrapped in emergency blankets. Some photographs were recent. Some were old enough that Grant's hair was still dark. "My brother was 23 when a county crew refused to cross a closed road," he said. "They followed procedure. They waited for authorization. He died a mile from a warm vehicle." No one interrupted. "I built Summit Sentinel because people deserved a team that would move before committees finished talking. For years, we did exactly that. We found miners, hikers, stranded travelers, grandparents. We brought people home. And then the rescues declined," Nora said. "The grants declined. Equipment aged. Insurance doubled. I had 60 employees and 12 dogs, depending on a spreadsheet written by people who had never stood in a whiteout. So you invented deployments. I preserved capacity. You created closures," Keene said. "Controlled training incidents. No civilians were placed in danger." Elias thought of the truck sliding toward the edge. "You released snow above an occupied station. You entered a restricted tunnel after repeated warnings. You tied Micah to marker 9. Grant's eyes moved to Cal outside. Cal secured her during transport. With the insignia cut off, she was no longer an active animal. Then why keep billing her certification? Grant did not answer. Nora removed the panel from the communications rack. County override line is physically disconnected. Keene keyed her radio. Static answered. The control house walls blocked the weak county signal. Sam pointed toward a countdown on the main screen. 28 minutes. Release sequence is armed, he said. Grant looked at the timer. Because the mountain is dangerous. Disarm it. I cannot responsibly do that. Keene drew her handcuffs. Then I will. Grant struck the covered switch. Alarms sounded. The countdown dropped from 28 minutes to 90 seconds. Sam lunged for the console. Grant shoved him aside and locked the keyboard with a metal key. Keene grabbed Grant's arm. He twisted free with surprising force and slammed an emergency partition button. A steel shutter dropped between the control room and the entry bay, separating Keene and Cal from Elias, Nora, Sam, and Micah. The lights changed from white to red. Manual release, Nora said. He bypassed the safety interval. Grant backed toward a side door leading to the charge gallery. The evidence bay will be buried. The county will still have its copies. No one needs to be hurt. You moved the schedule because the copies were not authenticated yet, Elias said. Grant opened the door. History will remember the people we saved, not the paperwork you misunderstood. He disappeared into the gallery and locked it behind him. 60 seconds. Sam opened the console access panel. The digital command has already left. We need to break the acknowledgement loop or the field initiators will fire. Nora traced the cables. The loop exits through the lower conduit, crosses the gallery, and returns through the external junction. Can you interrupt it here? Grant armored the line. 48 seconds. Elias looked through a narrow window into the gallery. Grant was crossing a metal catwalk toward the external junction box. There is another route, Sam said. Maintenance duct beneath the floor. He lifted a hatch. A black opening descended into a space barely 2 feet high. Elias's chest closed. 39 seconds. I can go, Nora said. You do not know the junction layout. You do. I saw the same cable pattern under the station. Micah stood at the hatch, nose moving. Elias lowered himself to the opening. Concrete pressed close on both sides. The red alarm light flashed across the floor. Aaron's voice came again. We still have 40 minutes. This time Elias answered it. No, we have 30 seconds. He entered. Mika followed without hesitation. The duct descended, turned, and narrowed beneath a support beam. Elias's shoulders scraped metal. His breath became shallow. He could hear Nora counting through the open hatch behind him. 24. Micah crawled close enough that her nose touched his boot. He reached the junction chamber at the end of the duct. 3 armored lines passed through a grated wall. The return cable was visible on the far side beyond a gap too narrow for Elias's arm. 18, Nora called. Elias removed a coil of lightweight signal cord from his pack. He clipped a magnetic interrupter to one end. The gap beneath the grate opened into the external gallery. A person could not cross. A dog could. But the gallery beyond was exposed to the slope through an open maintenance door. Wind drove snow across the floor. Micah saw it and stopped. 14. Elias attached the cord to her harness and pointed through the grate toward the junction box. Micah knew directional hand commands from her rescue training. The skill had been mentioned in her certification file. Elias had practiced only twice in the station hallway, asking her to carry a soft glove from one doorway to another. This was not a hallway. He held his palm low and pointed. Take line. Micah crouched. 10. Elias moved his hand forward. She squeezed beneath the grate and entered the gallery. Wind struck her. She froze at the edge of the open section. 8. Elias could not go first this time. He placed his gloved hand through the grate, as far as it would reach, and tapped the metal floor 3 times. Micah looked back. Go. She crossed. The signal cord uncoiled behind her. 5. Micah reached the external box and turned. The magnetic interrupter struck the steel housing but did not seat. 3. Elias pulled the cord once lifting the device. It swung and caught the exposed return plate. 1. The alarm stopped. For half a second, nothing moved. Then an explosion rolled across the mountain. The first initiator had fired before the loop broke. The control house shook. Snow struck the outer wall. The maintenance duct filled with dust. Elias covered his head as a support bracket tore loose behind him. When he looked up, the route back to the control room had collapsed beneath twisted sheet metal. Micah barked from the gallery. Nora Elias shouted. No answer. The red emergency lights had failed. Only his headlamp remained. He crawled toward the grate. The external gallery door stood open, but snow poured across the catwalk. Micah waited beside the junction box, the cord still attached to her harness. Elias squeezed through the gap after her. The blast had released a narrow section of West Run, not the full slab. Debris buried the lower access road and struck the C4 entrance, but the main archive remained visible above the snowline. The first failure had not destroyed the evidence. Grant stood at the far end of the catwalk beside a manual trigger panel. Bloodless shock marked his face. He had expected the full sequence. You interrupted the return, he said. Elias rose slowly. Micah did. Grant looked at the dog. She was never reliable. She was reliable enough to survive you. Grant turned the manual key. A second bank of initiators armed. Elias moved forward. Grant pulled a flare pistol from the emergency cabinet and pointed it at him. Stop, Micah growled, body low. Grant's hand shook. I will not let 30 years of rescue work be reduced to accounting errors. You changed a forecast that killed Aaron. I changed a rating. You gave the order to proceed. The words struck where Grant intended. Elias stopped. Yes, he said. I did. Grant blinked. Elias continued. I have spent 11 years pretending guilt meant I had to obey it forever. It does not. I made my choice. Now you answer for yours. Grant fired. The flare struck the railing and burst into white fire. Micah flinched, but did not run. Elias dropped behind a control cabinet, then pulled the signal cord. The magnetic interrupter tore free and snapped across the catwalk, striking Grant's wrist. The flare pistol fell. Micah barked and advanced, stopping 6 feet from him. She did not attack. Her stance blocked the manual panel. Grant stepped backward. His boot caught the loose cord. He fell against the railing, not over it, but hard enough to lose the manual key. Elias crossed the distance, secured Grant's arms, and held him on the floor until Keene forced open the partition and reached the gallery. Nora restored the county radio link using the analog patch line. State responders arrived within minutes. The second initiator bank never fired. At dawn, investigators opened the control system and found something Grant had overlooked. Every manual command automatically wrote a mirrored record to the county map server for insurance review. He had falsified the visual weather feed, disconnected the override, advanced the countdown, and selected a debris path intersecting C4. Each action appeared under his administrator credentials. His own map showed that he knew exactly what the release would bury. Keene read him the charges beside the control console. Grant listened without speaking until she mentioned reckless endangerment. "No one was supposed to be in the bay," he said. Nora looked at him. "You warned us over the radio. You knew we were there." Grant turned toward the windows. Below, morning light reached Blackglass Pass. The partial slide had covered one road and damaged the archive entrance, but crews were already digging it open. The evidence survived. So did the station. So did the dog Grant had reduced to a number. Micah sat beside Elias while a medic wrapped a cut on his forearm. Her own paws were wet and cold but uninjured. The brass compass still hung from her collar. Elias removed it and held it in his palm. Micah touched the metal 3 times. This time there was nothing inaccessible behind it. She was simply returning what belonged to him. 3 weeks after the explosion, Grant Halberd entered the Blackglass County hearing room without the red rescue jacket that had made him recognizable across Colorado. He wore a dark suit and walked between 2 attorneys. The room was full before he arrived. Former Summit Sentinel employees occupied the left rows. County officials and state investigators sat on the right. Behind them were people Grant's teams had genuinely rescued over the years. Families from flooded canyons, hikers recovered from winter trails, a retired lineman whose photograph still hung in the control house. Elias sat near the rear beside Nora and Dr. Ortiz. Micah lay beneath his chair, wearing no working insignia, only a plain leather collar. Her body had regained weight. The fur beneath her chest remained thin, where the old harness had rubbed a pale ring that would take months to fill in. Grant saw the dog when he entered. He looked away first. The county chair called the hearing to order. This was not a criminal trial. Those charges would proceed separately. The hearing concerned Summit Sentinel's contracts, control authority, animal records, and future operation. That distinction did not make the room less tense. A state auditor presented the financial evidence. Duplicate deployments had produced more than $4 million in reimbursements, renewals, and emergency grants over 7 years. Controlled releases had been used to create at least 9 road closures later billed as rescue responses. 11 dogs had been retired on paper while their certification numbers continued appearing on invoices. Grant's attorney rose. "No evidence shows Mr. Halberd personally harmed an animal," he said. "Nor can the county ignore the hundreds of legitimate missions carried out by Summit Sentinel." Nora leaned toward Elias. "There it is." "What?" "The argument that good work becomes credit against whatever follows." The chair asked Grant to speak. He stood without notes. "I will not defend clerical practices that failed to meet current standards," he began. "But I will defend the people who answered calls at midnight while others waited for paperwork. Summit Sentinel saved lives. If our activity reports preserved funding needed to maintain that capacity, then the board must consider outcomes, not isolated entries removed from context." A murmur moved through the room. Grant turned toward the families behind him. "Ask them whether the helicopter was real. Ask whether the blankets were real. Ask whether the hands pulling them from snow were real." A woman in the second row began to cry. Her husband placed an arm around her. Elias understood why Grant had remained protected for so long. The rescues had happened. Gratitude had happened. A lie built around real courage was harder to expose than a lie built from nothing. The chair called Nora. She walked to the witness table with the taped notebook under one arm. Grant watched her sit. "You were terminated by Summit Sentinel," his attorney said. "Yes, for unauthorized handling of confidential records. I copied dispatch times after the digital logs began changing. You had a conflict with Mr. Halbert. I had a conflict with billing the same dog in two places." The attorney displayed a photograph of a successful rescue. "Were you the dispatcher on this mission?" "Yes." "Did Summit Sentinel save those two people?" "Yes." "Then why should this board trust your judgment over an organization with a proven record?" Nora looked at the photograph for several seconds. "Because the people in that picture deserve to be saved," she said. "And the people whose names were used in fake reports deserved the truth. One does not cancel the other." The room quieted. She opened her notebook and read the names of the 11 dogs removed from the active roster. Mika Boone, Tessa, Flint, Harbor, Sable, Otis June, Ranger, Tess Old Mac. For each animal she gave the last confirmed location and the final questionable billing date. When she reached Micah, Grant interrupted. "That dog was unstable." Micah raised her head beneath Elias's chair. Nora closed the notebook. "That dog recognized an unsafe cornice, survived being erased from your records, crossed an exposed gallery carrying the line that stopped your release, and did so without biting the man who threatened her." Grant's attorney objected. The chair overruled him. Dr. Ortiz testified next. She described the prolonged harness abrasion, weight loss, frost injury, and absence of any legitimate adoption record. She did not speculate about who tied Mika to marker 9. She stayed with what the body showed. Then Sam Rourke explained the control map. On a large screen, he displayed Grant's manual command sequence. The selected slide path intersected the C4 archive entrance. The system logged the county override being disconnected. It recorded the schedule change and the 90-second manual acceleration. Grant's attorney argued that the release was intended to protect the pass. Sam pointed to the raw snow readings. No professional using these measurements would order a full West Run release that morning. Could conditions have changed? They did not. How can you be certain? Because Mr. Halbert's own unedited field sensors say so. Finally, Elias was called. He took the witness seat and placed the brass compass on the table. Grant's attorney asked about Aaron Vale. "You were team leader during the exercise in which Mr. Vale died." "Yes." "You ordered the team to continue." "Yes." "Despite worsening weather." "Yes." The attorney paused, perhaps expecting Elias to defend himself. He did not. "Then Mr. Halbert did not make that choice for you." "No." Grant looked up. Elias continued before the attorney could sit. "He changed the forecast beneath my choice. That matters. It does not erase what I did. Accountability is not a blanket we pass around until everyone feels warm. It belongs to each person who made a decision." The chair allowed the answer. Elias looked directly at Grant. "I carried mine for 11 years. He can begin carrying his now." Grant's composure failed. "You think admitting guilt makes you noble," he said from his table. "You had men under your command. You pushed forward because you wanted the exercise completed. Do not sit there and pretend you are different from me." Elias took a breath. "I was not different when I believed the mission mattered more than the warning." Grant stopped. "The difference came later," Elias said. "Someone told me to stop. This time I listened." Micah stood beneath the chair and leaned against his leg. The county chair called for order. After a recess, the board voted unanimously to terminate Summit Sentinel's contracts and emergency control authority. A court-appointed receiver would preserve the legitimate rescue operation while state agencies reviewed every deployment. The canine program would be transferred to independent veterinary and training oversight. Grant was barred from operating rescue organizations pending the criminal case. The chair addressed him directly. "You built something this county once needed," she said. "Then you decided its survival, placed it above the people and animals it existed to serve." Grant's face appeared older than it had on the mountain. "What happens to the teams?" he asked. "The teams are not you." Deputy Keene approached with an investigator after the hearing adjourned. Grant's attorneys gathered their files. Several former employees passed him without speaking. At the doorway, he looked back at the wall of people he had once expected to defend him. Some still wept for the good he had done. None stepped forward to prevent him from leaving in custody. Micah watched until the door closed. Then she lowered her head onto Elias's boot. The second scene began in January, when the county returned to Blackglass with documents instead of warrants. Snow covered the pass in a deep, unbroken layer. The station roof had been repaired, the control network separated from private access, and Bay C4 had become an official evidence archive. A temporary sign stood beside the porch. Blackglass Winter Response Cooperative. Nora hated the name. "It sounds like a place that sells organic turnips," she said. Mara Keene signed the final page and slid it across the table. "You rejected every other name. They were worse." Elias sat at the opposite end with the county easement agreement before him. The agreement granted permanent emergency access across his land to the station, the upper road, and the C4 archive. It also prohibited private development that could obstruct rescue operations or avalanche monitoring. The ski company withdrew its offer the moment the draft became public. The county's purchase proposal fell by almost half. His attorney had called the easement unnecessary and financially reckless. Elias signed it anyway. Keene watched the pen leave the paper. "You understand this cannot be undone when the property changes hands." "I understand. You could sell the road corridor separately and keep the cabin parcel private. Then the next owner could close the upper access when the county needed it most." Nora looked through the window toward marker 9. "There goes your quiet retirement." Elias capped the pen. Quiet was never the same as peace. The cooperative did not restore Summit Sentinel under another name. Its board included county responders, 2 former handlers, a veterinarian, a public auditor, and 1 rotating resident from the mountain communities. Dispatch logs were mirrored to independent servers and printed automatically at Blackglass. No organization could own the dog certification numbers. Retirement records required a verified home veterinary follow-up and an in-person welfare check. Nora became communications director after insisting she did not want the position. Keene reminded her that she had already rewritten the entire dispatch protocol. "That was criticism," Nora said. "It came with page numbers." Dr. Ortiz supervised the search for the missing dogs. 7 were found alive in private training kennels or informal foster homes. 2 had been adopted by former handlers who never realized the transfers were invalid. Old Mac had died peacefully the previous spring. 1 dog harbor remained missing. The unanswered name stayed on a whiteboard in the station office. Micah was not returned to rescue duty. A state evaluator offered to recertify her after watching the gallery footage. Elias declined before Micah entered the testing room. "She has nothing left to prove," he said. Instead, Micah lived at the small cabin below the station. Some mornings she walked with Elias while he inspected markers. Other days she slept beside Nora's radio desk and raised her head whenever a field team checked in. She still stopped before broad, open slopes. No one pulled her across. In February, the cooperative received its first real emergency call. 2 elderly motorists were stranded below the south gate during a sudden ground blizzard. The road team reached them within 40 minutes. No helicopter appeared. No cameras followed. The responders logged the trip, returned the unused supplies, and drank coffee in the station kitchen. Elias stood outside while the vehicles descended safely. A young handler named Luis came beside him. "Feels small after everything that happened," Luis said. "2 people are warm who would have been cold." Luis nodded. "That is enough. It has to be." Micah came out carrying one of Elias's gloves. She had stolen it from the bench, an offense she repeated whenever he stayed outside too long. Luis laughed. "She going back to work." "She is working." "At what?" Micah dropped the glove at Elias's feet and looked at the cabin door. Elias picked it up. "Management." The laughter that followed was brief and ordinary. It did not heal Aaron's death. It did not return the years Elias had spent punishing himself or find the last missing dog. It did not make the mountain safe. It made the station feel inhabited. That evening, volunteers ate stew at the long maintenance table. Nora argued with Sam over antenna placement. Keene read a report while pretending not to listen. Dr. Ortiz slipped Mika a piece of meat beneath the table and denied it when Elias looked over. Elias sat near the end, outside the center of the room. He preferred it there. But when someone passed him bread, he took it instead of saying he was not hungry. The final scene came after the others had gone home. Snow began shortly before midnight, soft enough that the flakes fell almost straight. Elias walked with Mika from the cabin to Marker 9. The repaired beacon carried a new reflective band and a small county plate. No cable remained at its base. Beyond the marker, the pass opened into a white slope beneath the stars. Micah stopped at the edge. Elias stopped with her. He removed the brass compass from his coat. The casing still bore a scratch from the control house gallery. For years he had used it to count breaths and remind himself where he stood. It had belonged to Aaron before the accident. Elias fastened the compass to the beacon post. The metal clicked softly against the new plate. Micah touched it 3 times. Then she looked toward the open slope. Elias stepped forward first. 1 pace. 2. 3. He did not turn to call her. A moment later, Mika placed her front paw inside the first mark his boot had left in the snow. She followed the second, then the third. Together they crossed the exposed ground toward the warm square of light in the cabin window. Behind them, the compass moved gently in the wind, no longer hidden beneath a coat and no longer carried as a sentence. The most important thing Elias left at Marker 9 was not the compass itself. It was the belief that carrying pain forever was the same as honoring the person he had lost. Micah never asked him to forget Aaron, excuse his own mistake, or pretend the mountain could not hurt them again. She only waited until he was ready to take the next step, then placed her paw inside the mark he had made. Sometimes healing begins that quietly, not when the past disappears, but when loyalty gives us enough courage to stop walking alone. If this story stayed with you, share the lesson you are carrying tonight. Cross-session update. Reminder, not for audio. 1 hook direction used. Direction 5, loss or hope. 2. Add the completed row to the section 0 bis history table. 3. Add Elias, Vance, and Micah to the 15 script name list. 4. Add the crime mechanism to the used list in section 4C.